It's June 24th. A good Thursday morning to you and welcome to Real Talk. This episode is presented by our title sponsor, Bitcoin Well. Right now, people are paying attention to what's going on in crypto and, as mentioned, different perspectives on what's going on. One perspective might be this is a crash. Another perspective might be it's a correction. Another perspective might be this is another chance we never expected to get in on the action. If you're trying to sort it out, but you're being honest with yourself and you acknowledge you don't totally understand the thing, you don't totally understand crypto and blockchain, and you don't understand lightning networks, and you have questions, the team at Bitcoin Well, for me personally, they step up and answer questions of all kinds of things. Bitcoin wallets and keys, and look them up online. They've got real live humans that can talk to you, even meet with you. You'll find them under the sponsors tab at ryanjesperson.com.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
We've got a lot to talk about today. If you're joining us live, 10:30 Eastern, 8:30 Mountain Time, in about 90 minutes from now, we're going to hear from the Cowessess First Nation in the province of Saskatchewan. This is a gut-wrenching discovery. The First Nation announcing to community members earlier this week that they've discovered what they say is hundreds of unmarked graves at a former residential school site. This is, we're talking about an hour and a half's drive, about 160 kilometers outside Regina. This is about a month. It's been about a month since Canadians were forced to reckon with the discovery of 215 bodies, children's bodies, some of them as young as 3, outside the former residential school at Kamloops to Swepnik. This was in British Columbia. Now we're talking about Saskatchewan. These discoveries are being made across the country. This is, and I hesitate to call it this, but let me say for many Canadians, a new reality, only because we have been getting up to speed on this. These bodies have been here for many decades in some circumstances. The question now is, what is the federal government? What are the provincial governments? What are First Nations? And what are individual Canadians going to do about it? We'll understand more later today when this announcement is made. And, of course, we'll be talking about steps that governments are taking. Alberta's government earmarking $8 million in grants for First Nations, Métis, and other organizations to research unmarked burial sites and undocumented deaths at former residential schools in the province. The federal government as well, setting aside several $million, about $4 million of that is going to go, 4.8 rather, closer to $5 million will go to 74 First Nations in Saskatchewan to pursue these types of, I mean, what a grim assignment, but an important assignment. Obviously, the federal government saying there's $27 million for that. We'll talk about that. As a matter of fact, in about 10 minutes, we'll check in with the Grand Chief of the Tree 8 First Nations of Alberta, Chief Arthur Noskey, who will join us to talk about something different in a sense. We're going to talk about a new online reporting tool that Treaty 8 is making available to its community members in the context of harassment, even racism, when it comes to treaty rights around harvesting and foraging and some of the rights inherent in treaties that were signed many, many years ago. We'll get the details there, but obviously we'll ask Grand Chief Noskey where his thoughts are at leading up to this announcement coming up again in about 90 minutes from now, coming up later Thursday morning. This is a tough one. And I know that many of you in corresponding with the show over the past couple of days have said, Ryan, I get the sense, and I know that this is still just the beginning. There will be more and more and more of these. This will be occurring in months and years to come, and it's something that we're all going to have to commit to talking about and to processing and to acting on together. And we'll do that here on Real Talk. You've probably also been paying attention to Bill C-6, which passed in the House of Commons on Tuesday. If you're like me, your head starts to swim and you can lose track over which bill is which one is C-6. Well, this is the one that bans forced conversion therapy. 263 members of Parliament voted in favor of the bill, voted in favor of banning the so-called therapy not recognized nor endorsed by any mental health professionals in any jurisdiction. And we're going to talk to a survivor of conversion therapy in just a moment. It's worth noting that 63 MPs voted against it. And we'll talk about that. The conversion therapy ban must now pass the Senate, get through the Senate before it can become law, but the chances of that happening, some are saying, prior to a fall election are slim to none. In other words, there may be a row still to hoe here. Matt Ashcroft is a conversion therapy survivor. He's co-founder of, as a matter of fact, ctsurvivors.org, where you can check it out, Conversion Therapy Survivors. And I'm so grateful, Matt, that you've agreed to join us this morning on Real Talk. Welcome to the show. Tuesday's vote, MPs, 263 of them, saying we need to ban, it's time to ban forced conversion therapy. I would imagine you're going to tell me it was a step in the right direction, but where's your head at? Where's your heart at right now?
I think it can go further. Personally, I think that if you don't know what is happening in behind closed doors, you can't really consent to the abuse that happens. So why are you able to go into a position where it's dangerous, essentially?
Matt, can you why don't we do a bit of a scene setter here, and let me say in advance how grateful I am that you have been willing to speak so candidly and so openly about your life experience. People don't use the word survivor lightly in this context. Would you tell us about how conversion therapy impacted your life as a young person?
Yeah, so I explained this on the other program that we were on, whatever, but essentially
you and I have spoken before on another radio station. Yes. That's right. Let's just get that out there, Matt. Let's just get that out there, brother. Let me say this. Okay, now that we're laughing and being candid, can I say how good it is to see your face again? Maybe I might have started this interview a little bit too formal. I should probably have said, "My man, it is good to see your face again. Every time I see your smile, you make me smile. You are a ray of sunshine. You are a survivor. You are a beautiful human being." Now let's talk about conversion therapy. Let's get into this, because this is one where you've told me before you were lucky to make it out alive.
Yes. So now I'm going to explain it in further detail. So essentially, I went to this camp in New Hope, Pennsylvania. The camp was, you had to sign a waiver. So I didn't really know what was on it, but in order for me to participate in the camp, I had to send this waiver. So I had to sign my initials. And then I walked out the door, and there was this guy with this large stick. He was like, "Why are you here?" I'm like, "Oh, I thought you knew why I was here." And then I walked down this path, and then the last guy, there's a total of 4 guys that were asking questions. One of the questions was, "What was your greatest fear?" And because I had a bad relationship with my dad, and I thought that was, they convinced me that was the reason why that I was gay. I said, the reason, I want to get the love and the appreciation of my dad again. And I walked into this room. There was trash bags taped to the windows. I can't see in, I can't see out. And there was a circle around, looking at this statue, something that you would get at Michael's craft store, looking at this candle. And I remember just staring at it. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have watches. Staring at the sun. We had to rely on the sun. But if you're indoors and there was trash bags on the windows, then you can't really see outside. So you don't know what time of day it is.
Matt, hang on a second. So this is, how old are you at this time?
I'm 31.
You're 31 when you went to the camp, you mean? You're 31
yes,
today.
Correct.
How old are you today?
Yes, 31.
How old were you when you went to the camp?
24.
24. And were you out?
No, I wasn't. I actually, it was a fear. I was afraid of my dad and the way that he treated me when I was growing up. And I hid in the closet, and I did anything that I could to please my dad.
So did your dad want you to go to this camp? Did you willingly go to this camp? How did you wind up there?
I don't think it's a willingly thing. I think the way that my dad treated me when I was younger, it resulted into a lot of depression, bullying, and I just stayed by myself and hid in the closet.
So your experience at this camp, you don't know what time it is. You feel it sounds a little bit like sort of what we see in the movies, whether it comes to some sort of a detox type situation or whether it's conversion therapy, the type of thing where there's going to be a real concerted effort to change what you're all about. What did that involve? I mean, how did they pursue that mandate, so to speak?
Oh, here we go. So there's 4 major stories that I tell. One, it's by this guy. It's called Coming Out Straight by Richard Cohen. He designed this. So I'll just show you here. So essentially, he did a practice. It's cited on CNN, where he took a tennis racket and a pillow and started whacking it with a tennis racket. My version is because they viewed being gay as an overprotective mother and an absent father. Essentially, like I used they want me to picture my dad horizontally, and I had a baseball bat. And so they were encouraging me to get my anger out on my dad because they were the reason why, or they viewed it as that was the reason why that I was gay because of the way that he treated me when I was growing up. So I didn't know the difference at the time, but that's what I thought. And they encouraged me to do that. I remember I couldn't move my arms and somebody was grabbing me by the back and I had looked in this slender mirror because they held it up to my face and I just started crying uncontrollably. And I just felt frozen.
So obviously part of this, experience. Matt, part of this is to say, if your dad's the reason you're gay, and so we got to work this out, is the implication, or maybe they would state it plainly, that being gay is a problem. What position did the camp take there? I mean, was this a religious camp? Was it we're going to pray the gay away type of a thing?
Yeah, it was all religions and no religion. So it's a universal faith-based camp. Mm-hmm. You can find it. It's called Brothers Road. It's, in my opinion, it's completely dangerous. I seen somebody reenact somebody's rape in front of my eyes. I remember the screams and his face and just repeatedly yelling and crying at the top of his lungs, stop, 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 stop. I mean, if 63 conservatives support that, then all the power to them. But
Matt, at what point how did your experience at this camp end? I mean, did you run away? Did you do your time? Did you get booted out? I mean, how did it wrap up? And then what ultimately, when you look back now, this is 7 years ago, what impact did that camp or that experience have on you getting to this point now where you're doing interviews and talking about it?
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear that. My internet went out.
It's okay, Matt. How did your time at the camp wrap up? How did it end? And ultimately, in retrospect, looking back on it, how did it influence you where you are today?
The camp was a couple of days. So like when I was leaving the camp, I went with a friend and a former friend. And one of the things that I said was, hey, don't you think this is weird that something like this is happening? He was like, I thought it was a good experience. And I'm like, how could you think that was a good experience? And then I remember seeing some guys, because there was another practice where there was this guy that was obese and he had wrote things that he hated about himself, like the F word and fat and just like calling himself these names. And then that resulted for him to make memes of himself, calling himself the F word and calling himself a fat ass. And I don't know if he's alive. Like, this is something that I think about every day. And so the impact is these people don't realize the amount of things that they're inflicting onto others, and lives are at stake. It's not a joke.
Matt, when you talk about this, I mean, it's clear that you're thinking about yourself. You're thinking about other people as well. When the subject of conversion therapy is discussed at a national level, and when there's a federal vote on it, do you believe that members of the public and politicians, the 300 or so that voted on this, approximately, or the 300 and so that would have a vote on this, do you believe that there's enough information out there about what conversion therapy is and the impact it can have on people? Do you think that the general public is informed enough about it?
No, but if you're wanting to find information on it, I would visit at Truth Wins Out or Truth Wins Out _org on Instagram, because that is one of the most the biggest resources that I can find on the internet right now. Essentially, it was interviewing survivors and former ex-gay leaders at the same time. There was a video that was released where a former leader of conversion therapy, Yvette Cantu Schneider, was talking about leaders going up to their clients and proposing sex or making sexual advances to others. So it's I don't think politicians, specifically the the Conservative Party, knows what they're voting for, but it's not what they think. Like, you're perpetuating a lie, and I hope you know that.
Some people in our live chat are saying that, Heidi, for example, says she had a conversation with her Conservative MP who voted nay, who voted against this, said he's very against conversion therapy, but he didn't like the wording of the bill. Says it could criminalize people having conversations about sexuality. Says Heidi, it's interesting. I'm sure that many politicians will find reasons, or find, a way to justify their vote. I mean, I'm looking at the names of some of these MPs, and some of them are perceived to be, I think, more progressive than some of their other conservative colleagues. And I know that some of their constituents have been appalled by this. I also see conversations, Matt, and I want to put this to you. I mean, put this question right down the middle here. I mean, this is a pitch that you can hit. But, you're saying you're talking to a guy at this camp, and you're saying that the guy says, well, the experience was great for me. And it was a good experience for me, or I wanted to be here. People will point out that, you went to the camp. You said you didn't know what you were getting into, but you went there yourself. And I've seen some politicians say, well, why is it the role of the government, or, in more loaded language, why should we criminalize, LGBTQ2S plus community members who may be seeking, this is their language, not mine, Matt, but they may be seeking to reconcile these feelings they're having, right? That's what they'll say. These feelings they're having, these tendencies they're having, and they want to reconcile that with their faith. And they want to go to an organization they trust, the church, and people they trust, clergy, and they want them to pray with them, and they want them to help them sort it out. And why should the government play a role, or why should the government interfere or criminalize that type of quote-unquote counseling? What would you say in response?
If you want to completely damage your mental health, all the power to you. Go and pray for people about their sexuality continuously. It wears on somebody. Like, it emotionally wears on their mental health. And I just can't stand by something that I just know that doesn't work. It just doesn't work. It simply doesn't work. And if every medical association says that conversion practices, this is what I say now, it's conversion practices, not conversion therapy, because there's nothing therapeutic about it. Let's be real.
Well, and it's worth pointing out, it's been virtually condemned by every professional body worth its salt when it comes to mental health professionals and mental counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists. It's a long list. There are some standalone outlier groups, special interest groups that have portrayed themselves as, the quote unquote American Institute of whatever, that do give the green light to conversion therapy. But you talk to any mental health professional, psychologist, psychiatrist, with respectable credentials, and they've widely condemned this practice. Matt, what's your message to other? I want to ask you or give you a chance to talk to young people. It doesn't, as a matter of fact, have to be young people. My sister, a counselor, works with, I think you know this, trans seniors. I mean, she's got a very fascinating practice with older people. So maybe I shouldn't ask you just to speak to young people, but to LGBTQ2S plus people. Here we are in Pride Month, and they're seeing this vote go down at the federal level. And on the good news front, it passes. On the tough news front, 6 or so MPs voted against it, and it may not actually make its way through Senate. And so people are trying to sort this out and trying to figure out if this is a win or at least a couple steps forward. What's your message to people today? You
can't consent to abuse at all. Conversion practices, practicing conversion onto somebody does nothing but wear away your mental health. And whether you want to pretend to be a good person, whether you want to pretend to say that everything is right, you are being harmed. And if you go to something like this, and you got to be aware that this is continuing now. So if I seen my somebody else's sexual assault in front of my eyes, this same thing is continuing now. So do something about it.
Matt Ashcroft is a co-founder of Conversion Therapy Survivors. You can find him online. You can find them at ctsurvivors.org and look for him at mattash89. My friend, it's great to see your face again, and thanks for making time for us.
It's good to see you too.
We appreciate this advocacy. You bet, Matt. Thank you. We're going to move on to talk to Grand Chief Arthur Noskey in just a moment. I'm curious for your thoughts on this. I know that a lot of you have been sharing with us on our live chat. Our hashtag, of course, Real Talk RJ as well on Twitter and on Instagram is powered by the team at Park Power at parkpower.ca. Right now, your chance to save $70 on your first bill when you bring over your internet, electricity, and or natural gas services, commercial, residential, they do it all. They profit share in their communities, meaning they give back 10% of what they profit to the nonprofits in the communities where they live and work. We're really proud to partner with Park Power. Also wanted to give a shout out to the team at Friesen Brothers. BC cherries have touched down at the 16 Friesen Brothers locations across Alberta, and everybody's excited about that. They're the best cherries in the world. That's why Friesen Brothers, so they're proudly Alberta grown and Alberta owned, have no problem looking west when it comes to bringing in the freshest cherries that are available. You're not going to find them year round like you're going to find them right now. So head on over to Friesen Brothers, including that beautiful new store in South Edmonton. Friesen Brothers is Alberta grown and Alberta owned. Sherwood and St. Albert Dodge has the best selection of Ram trucks in the province of Alberta, period. That's because, number one, they already started out ahead. Sherwood and St. Albert Dodge have been forefront in consumers' minds. They've been leading sales across the province of Alberta collectively for a number of years, but they share inventories too, which means right now at a time when truck inventories are relatively low due to microchip shortages and a bunch of other pandemic-related factors, you're still going to find the Ram truck you want when you check in at St. Albert and Sherwood Dodge. You can find them online under the sponsors tab at ryanjesperson.com. Well, this is a really interesting story, a new online form to report harassment of First Nations people practicing treaty rights. You can find it online, and we'll be talking about this. It's at treaty8.ca. Arthur Noskey is Grand Chief of the Treaty 8 First Nations of Alberta. Grand Chief, we're grateful to have you joining us this morning. I'm looking forward to speaking with you about this online forum, about the issue of harassment, and you're saying racism when it comes to treaty rights for community members with Treaty 8. I have to lead off, though, asking you this morning about this announcement out of Saskatchewan. We're going to be hearing from the Cowessess First Nation in about an hour from now, and they'll be discussing the discovery of what they say are hundreds of unmarked graves at a former residential school site. You yourself, as an Indigenous man, as a community leader, how are you wrapping your head around what this nation, what millions of people are coming to terms with right now?
Well, it's really hard to, I guess, watch news nowadays, knowing that the elders, the survivors are impacted. They're just devastated every time there's announcements happening. But I guess the suspicions basically aren't there anymore, that they're reality. And every survivor that we've talked to date has always had a story about, their questions about that process, like about kids missing, or we're told that some ran away, or babies stopped crying all of a sudden, and, like what happened to them. So with the findings, now I believe that this is reality. Everybody's aware of it. And how do we resolve it going forward? How do we bring closure? If we do bring closure. But I think that information, the truth about it and of it, and if there's any additional mass graves out there of children that, they need to be marked off, acknowledge that they're there, and go work from there, I believe. Governments talk about truth and reconciliation, and it seems like the settlements have happened to the survivors, payouts have happened. Was it the intent of governments to not, I guess, dig any more into the history because of these atrocities that are now surfacing here?
When you speak with your community members or your fellow community leaders, I don't know how to ask this question, because I don't want to ask you if you think it's a good thing, because this is obviously devastating. But like you said, some of the suspicion is being removed, and Canadians are being forced to reconcile and to understand and to grapple with and to process the reality that Indigenous people and that elders and that survivors have been talking about for years. And I would understand, I would suspect, let me say, that there's probably quite a bit of, I would imagine quite a bit of anger from people, especially survivors that have said, now you're listening. But I would imagine at the same time, maybe some people are feeling like, at least we finally got here. At least now governments will have to earmark resources here. At least we will have to adopt some of these recommendations from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I mean, where do you land on that?
Well, it's very, I guess, a complex situation here, where on one hand, I'll say this, and I lost an uncle that was a survivor of the residential school a year ago, May 14th. And his question, like, I was just sharing this story, and I've shared it before, that, he used to say, son, you hear babies crying, he said, like in the night. And then all of a sudden you don't hear babies crying. And he would say, babies cry when they're hurting, when they're hungry, when they're cold, when they're scared. All of a sudden, babies don't cry. It's not, they just stop, right? What happened to them? Why did they stop crying? And, like, he passed at 93 years old, and it was 84 years prior to that he was in a residential school for 5 years. So that was the question he went to his grave with. What happened to those children? So now, it's everywhere. Basically, it's on the news, and, it's just devastating. You can't even begin to think of what the survivors are going through, right? Emotionally, the elderly they're devastated with this type of news. And in saying that, like I said, I think it's only going to get worse with the findings and the ground penetrating radar that's going to happen in other, like I think in Treaty 8, there's 11 schools in Treaty 8, Alberta anyway. So, and those suspicions basically are at every school. Some of the findings, when they used to talk about residential schools, I always thought there's only one in Gruard, and talking to Chief Capo or the Chief Helcro out of Gruard, here there was two. There was a Roman Catholic and also an Anglican residential school there. So now, like, we're starting to get the picture basically as to how many out there, where they were, and day schools versus residential.
Have you had conversations with community members in Treaty 8 the First Nations that I would imagine that there will be, again, it's not my place to speculate, but I can see how First Nations would want to see the ground penetrating radar investigation occur. People would want to know what is there. People, if for no other reason that they can be properly marked and respected. Some First Nations, I would imagine, and we've been speaking with expert Indigenous voices across the country on this, some First Nations will want to have the bodies exhumed, and some will not. Have there been conversations in Treaty 8 First Nations where people have discussed where wishes are with that, or what direction they'd like to go, or perhaps when these investigations will begin? Are communities having these conversations?
Well, we got an invite from, like I said, Chief Halcrow out of Greward. And basically, when the Kamloops news came about, so we went and basically the team from Treaty 8 went to go meet with them. And basically, the issues or the questions that we have, like a lot of these former sites or residential schools are on reserve, or they're just off reserve, or they're basically in a hamlet or a small town. So when when Kamloops surfaced, basically, he started getting calls from elders that, through construction that exhumed bones and, were just told to kind of bury them off to the side. So in saying that, Chief Halcrow, said, okay, well, how do we go about this as collective, as Treaty 8, because it impacts all our elders, our citizens are impacted, they're triggered. So the chiefs met here about almost two weeks ago, Treaty 8 chiefs. The strategy is basically to have a task force of chiefs along with the survivors, and basically put a plan in place because a lot of the residential school areas, some of them have been cleared off, and there's some of them basically are in areas of they're treed areas right now.
Yeah.
But we wanted to identify, okay, if there was a grave site where the school was, where was it? And also for the gardens, where were they? And also where they raised the animals, right, to sustain the residential school. How big is that area? And the purpose for that, like just the discussions, is under the faith system of whether it's the Roman or the Anglican, that if there was a suicide that happened in the school, then those children were buried outside of the actual cemetery because they were considered condemned. Same thing, kids born out of wedlock would be buried outside. So now you're not looking at just a gravesite, you're looking at a bigger area of, okay, where else, right? So, and that's why we need to talk to the elders, the survivors. Where was this area? How big of an area did this encompass? And that ground penetrating radar to cover everything, because hopefully we identify I guess the lost kids and with the radar, and then hopefully, like I said again, try and bring closure, because if we miss out something, then I know it's going to reoccur somewhere at some point. The other thing too is we're engaging with the U of A, the archaeologists there, and some of these treed areas, I know with their expertise that they can identify potential area of, historically disturbed ground areas. So yeah, we're working on a collective front, and I know the chiefs are meeting next week, 28th and 29th, starting with the ceremony, meet with the elders, and then strategize a plan going forward. And like you said, speculations or, the different theories as to what happened, what transpired. We want to basically, identify possibly one company that we can work with, and that the information is just consistent. With the funding for any of the Indigenous group right now, anybody and everybody would want to, access that funding, and you have companies coming out with this equipment to do that. But for us, we want to be, we don't want contradicting or conflicting information of findings. We want it actually done thoroughly and properly. As far as exhuming bodies or bones, we haven't talked about that either. So until next week, we'll know better following week, I believe.
let me indicate how grateful I am your candor on this. I know that this is a very difficult thing to talk about. It's difficult for people to hear, and I don't even know if it's appropriate for me to talk to you about some of the things. I mean, there's just so much hurt and trauma among Indigenous people, survivors, generations that have followed these survivors, but also just among everyday people, including non-Indigenous people, Canadians. I mean, babies born out of wedlock. I mean, there was sexual assault, there was rape happening at these residential schools. There were murders, not deaths. These weren't all deaths from tuberculosis. There were murders, and children were murdered, and this is and was genocide. And I just don't even know, as a professional communicator, I can't find the words, and I don't even, quite frankly, know how to talk about it. And I'm so grateful that people like you, that community leaders like you, are willing to talk about it and provide some counsel through this, because I don't know where this country goes from here, quite frankly. Sharon, one of our regular commenters on our live chat of Métis Heritage, says our ancestors are awakening the land and its people to what really happened. She says, I know they're doing this. I can feel it. People are processing this in different ways. And I'm very grateful that you've agreed to speak with us about this, Grand Chief. It's actually, as a matter of fact, for our audience's knowledge, we booked you to talk to us before this announcement, before the Cowessess First Nation announced their findings and let us know that they're going to be providing us further information today. The reason initially that we asked you to come on the show is to talk about this incident report, the report form that's being made available now for Cree and Dene people, Treaty 8 community members that are experiencing what you're saying is discrimination or even racism when it comes to being denied the guaranteed rights, responsibilities, and promises of the treaty rights. Can you explain to us what's going on, what community members are telling you, and why you, essentially, why treaty8.ca is featuring this incident report form?
Okay, I guess in saying that, I will go back to a treaty, right? Under treaty, basically, I know we found this argument basically on the Royal Proclamation of 1763, where King George III says, those Indians own those lands, make a treaty with them. And basically, it takes a sovereign nation to make a treaty with another sovereign nation. So that's the recognition that our elders, like our forefathers, had and understood. And I will just go back to Joe Willier. First time I served as Grand Chief, Treaty 8 was in 2006. And this elder approached me and he said, I'm here to talk to you just for you to realize your position, he said. And I said, yeah, okay, my position? He said, yes. As Grand Chief of Treaty 8, you sit at eye level with the crown, the imperial crown, the queen. And you don't look up towards her or you don't look down towards who. You're at eye level, you're sovereign. And you need to realize this. So in the treaty number 8, it says, as long as the sun shines, the grass grows, and the rivers flow. And in your comment on the residential school system, where there is sterilization, there is a rape, there is abuse in the schools. There's, research, medical research that were done on our people. And as long as the rivers flow, our elders' understanding of that was not, rivers and waterways. It was the understanding, as long as our women are given birth, that this treaty is alive. And now you can relate to why the sterilization experiments, right, of our people, why the removing of the language, why, I think genocide has 5 fingers, right? And it's basically isolation, relocation, education, sterilization, you name it. So in saying that, I believe that under Canada and the churches at the time, they were basically the mandate of genocide. Why? To do away with the sovereign people. And that's where, we talk about our inherent rights. Under the Commissioner's report of Treaty 8, and we did our research, that there it says that they were questioning about, okay, what about the hunting, fishing, trapping? And there, when they started talking about laws that would implement that, basically the First Nations started disengaging because that was their way of life, livelihood. And the commissioners basically, I guess, the negotiators started talking about twine, ammunition, like that. They'd provide these. So that kind of brought a bit of the comfort. But under one of the commissioners' report, it said that these will remain. The hunting, fishing, trapping, gathering will remain as if you've never entered treaty. So basically, under the treaty promises, like as sovereign nations, I'll say this, as sovereign nations agreed, this is the slot of the treaty. We did not agree to be a sovereign nation to fall under another sovereignty. Basically, we were, these are the articles of treaty, education, healthcare, you name it. So under that, it says treaty rights basically retained, it says, in the agreement. So we maintained our inherent rights to hunt, fish, and trap. So in saying that, the 1930 Natural Resource Transfer Act, basically, Canada decided that the western provinces of Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta are all of a sudden now going to, have to regulate the lands, basically anything in relation to the land to generate revenue. So in that process, there was no consultation with the treaty partners. Nobody was even aware of it, right? We weren't even able to get lawyers till after the 1950s. So basically, it was just, again, in coercion to do away with the people, their identity, and their relationship to the land. Residential schools as a prime focus right now. But in saying that, these laws are made, like the provincial government tried the sports fishing regulations, right? So our people were getting caught and said, all right, well, you broke it. You have a fish too small. You broke the sports fishing regulations. Flashed a status card and said, okay, well, I'm not here for sport. I'm here for, I have a right, constitutional protected. So it was challenged. One of our members challenged it. And as soon as it ended up in court, they threw it out. Okay, a few years later, I got fined for having fish too small. And same thing, I flashed my status card. And I was told, oh, that does not apply now. We're not under Parks Canada. We are now under justice. So you broke the law, was what the officers told me. And I said, well, how can that be? I have constitutional protected rights. How can you, contravene those without notifying us, And so anyway, I challenged it. I lawyered up, $10,000 retainer fee. And as soon as I hit the court, they threw it out. So in saying that, now, just recently, they have a domestic angling license. And under that domestic angling license, basically, as Indigenous people, you can either go get your license free of charge. Even if you chose not to, you still have to abide by the sports fishing regulations. So anyways, end up bringing to the table Minister Madu, Justice Minister, and also Minister Nixon, Environment, Parks, Minister Wilson, Indigenous Relations, and Chief Adam, Chief Giroux, Chief Horseman. So basically, we started talking about, what's going on here. Like, you didn't even tell us about this domestic angling license. And anyways, we ended up talking. So the ministers weren't even aware that this was being drafted up. So that Travis dude showed up there, and he explained it. Oh, this is a program we developed. Was his comment. That, it's a program under Parks in Canada. So Minister Nixon wasn't even aware of it. But in saying that, I'll go back to that sovereignty argument. How can a sovereign nation that entered into treaty with its inherent rights in relationship to the land all of a sudden fall under an agent's program under the province? So those are the issues that we have, and basically we're asking our people to if you're getting these charges, harassment out there, then let's start documenting them, because somebody has to come and honor the treaty relationship. Basically, we've honored our part where there's settlers on our lands, there's exploitation of resources, but as a people, we've been left behind. Why? Because the intent was to exterminate us, but we are still here. We're resilient, we've survived, and now let's come to the table. And how does truth and reconciliation look from here going forward?
So this is essentially you putting governments, in particular the provincial government, correct? You're putting governments on notice that you're not showing up to court anymore for these. As a matter of fact, this is going to be a bigger picture conversation that you're prompting about a lack of consultation around legislation that dishonors and flies in the face of the treaty, correct?
Exactly. And just to add to that, when we talk to the governments, both levels of government, they always refer to case law. Okay, because of case law, this legislation came about. All right, you can go back to the 1950s where, treaty hunters have been taken into court, and the court's case law has always sided with the treaty. So, to me, my question is, as a government, I think you're really close to a suicidal breakdown when, as a government, you cannot even adhere to your own justice system and its rulings. So that's the question out there. And, instead of waiting around for them to kind of realize what the treaties were about and that we as First Nations people here have inherent rights to the land, we're doing something about it, and let them come to us and say, no, you don't have it, or trying to deny our treaty because we've upheld our end. Now it's both levels of government that need to own up to it as well.
People can learn more about this incident report form or fill one out at treaty8.ca. Grand Chief Noskey, as you and I have been speaking here, as you and I have been having this conversation right now, we've learned just moments ago that the Cowessess First Nation has announced they've discovered 751 unmarked graves at the site of that former Indian residential school. I don't even know if there's a question there. I wonder if maybe you and I should just sit in silence for a second. 751. So, the nation will wrestle with that today. Much respect to you, and thank you for doing this. The National Indian Residential School crisis line is 1-866-925-4419. That's 1-866-925-4419. Arthur Noskey is Grand Chief, Treaty 8 First Nations of Alberta. Thank you for speaking with us today.
You're welcome, Ryan. Thank you.
751. 751. We've been led to believe as Canadians that the total deaths over about a century in Canada's residential schools were about, the official number is about 3,100. Oftentimes you'd hear people talking about 4,000. With 215 at one site in Kamloops and 751 at one site in Saskatchewan, does anybody believe that that number is 4,000? Are some of you, like me, starting to realize that this number is going to be a number that needs to be stamped on our hearts, stamped on our brains, spray painted on statues? A number that must be grappled with and recognized and respected. These are people. 751 children. I don't even know what to say. It's a school, but it's not, right? It's not. They're not schools at all, right? I wrestle with this in knowing how to properly comment on this or talk about this because I have many different feelings. I feel fury. My heart is shattered. I'm embarrassed, mortified, devastated, motivated. How about you? Talk@ryanjesperson.com is where you can send us emails. I know that our live chat is gathering in community. I know that later today our podcast subscribers will start to comment on this, and we'll look for those on Twitter, and we'll continue this conversation in days and weeks and months and years to come. You have our commitment on Real Talk, and this team will continue to host these conversations, and we will continue to listen. Rose says 751 bodies of children. I'm sickened. She says, I'm sickened by our religious members. What were they thinking? Joanne says, this is just the tip of the iceberg. My heart. Stan says, I'm just trying to comprehend. Lorraine just wonders, how is this allowed to happen? Kaylin says, this is a whole generation. Two Beaver says, I'm absolutely crushed and heartbroken. Miranda, all I can do is cry. So many people grateful for Grand Chief Noskey's comments here and how candid he was. April simply says, my heart breaks. Kim says, I'm talking to my kid this morning about what we can do on July 1st on Canada Day to honor these lost little ones. And she says, and I think that what we're going to do as a family is we're going to look at the Truth and Reconciliation Act, and we're going to start committing to what we can do. Blake says, our bias in looking at any group of people and deciding that we know better than they do about life is what starts us down a bad path. Blake says, I see that with so many things right now. In my entire broadcast career, I've never been in a situation like this, where it feels like we need to sit in community and just reflect. So I'll make you this commitment, because we'll continue. We're going to host a conversation in just a moment on what Alberta can look like over the next 30 years. Obviously, we'll start with this, even if that's not on the docket or that's not on our planned and approved list of subject matter of what we're going to talk about. Everybody needs to talk about this today. Everybody needs to understand how this applies to their lives. Everybody needs to understand what their mandate is right now. This cannot and must not be ignored, and let us not allow it to be ignored. Let's not allow people in our friends circle, people in our workplaces to ignore this. How could you possibly? So we'll reflect quietly. That goes without saying. Through the day, and we will make a commitment to you that we'll continue to host these conversations. These conversations are made possible because we have builders that when we launched Real Talk and told them what we wanted to do, we wanted to dig into stories that need to be told. We want to welcome discomfort. We want to push ourselves to better understand stories that truly matter. Isn't today a classic example? And these sponsors stepped up for us in a big way, including the team at Kubi Energy. From the very beginning, they've been with us. Jake and his team right now are installing solar projects. Sustainable energy projects is what they do across Western Canada, headquartered out of Edmonton and Kamloops, as a matter of fact. They've got teams out there right now of certified electricians. They're Tesla certified, the entire company, doing cool things like Tesla walls. Right now, there's an initiative where Canadians can actually save $9,000 on a solar setup. They have all the details for you at kubienergy.ca. Give Jake and his team a call today. Also, big shout out to the team at Local Waste. Coming up tomorrow, they'll present Trash Talk right here on the show. If you got something you got to get off your chest, Send us an email to talk@ryanjesperson.com. Label it trash talk. Local Waste has been working with customers from small businesses, the small independents, all the way up to the big guys, managing waste, recycling. It's what they do, and they pride themselves on coming up with solutions that are best for your business. Don't pay for more bin than you need. Start small. Local Waste relationship with your business will grow as your business grows. Find them online at localwaste.ca or under the sponsors tab at ryanjesperson.com. Well, coming up this weekend, Next 30. The Next 30. You've been hearing about this a little bit. You can see it at thenext30.ca. It's an initiative to envision what the province of Alberta could look like over the next number of decades, the next few, in fact. It's a summit that will go Saturday, and I'm proud to be taking part. The Possibility Summit. It opens up the door now to check in with a possibility panel, and I appreciate these three making time for us. Laurie Buffalo is a councillor for Samson Cree Nation near Maskwacis. She's a small business owner, an entrepreneur, and a business development professional. Brenda Barritt is a forager and a harvester, also a connector, a convener, and a coach. Has just recently moved back to Alberta after a career working overseas, is now operating, Brenda and her husband, Earthworks Farms, and is working on projects related to building more resilient rural communities. Chad Park is co-founder and chair of the Next 30, chair of the Possibility Panel. He was the founding director of the Energy Futures Lab, and he's now serving the role as VP Sustainability and Citizenship at the Cooperators based out of Edmonton, a good friend of this show. Laurie, Brenda, Chad, it's great to have you here this morning. I'm looking forward to this conversation. I'm grateful you're joining us. I know that all three of you are more than up for having meaningful conversations about what the future has to look like. And today, especially in light of this heart-wrenching and just absolutely impossible, I can't wrap my mind around this announcement. More than 751 bodies of young children discovered near a former residential school in Cowessess First Nation in Saskatchewan. I want to ask the three of you, if we're talking about the future of Alberta, we have to talk about reconciliation. We have to talk about this. Laurie, may I ask you, as a counselor, as a community leader for Samson Cree Nation, how are you processing the news today, the news out of Kamloops, the news out of other former residential school sites, and the news that we know is still coming at so many others?
Thank you, Ryan. It's one of those things where, as a descendant of a residential school survivor, this isn't something that's new to us. The pain, the shock, the dismay, the fury, isn't new to us. We live this on a daily. Considering I'm from Maskwacis, Alberta, we had the largest residential school here in Ermineskin. So for us, it's a part of our history, and it's very much a part of our reality. So it's very, as an individual, not even so much as a counselor or as somebody who is in various positions, as an individual, as a mother, it's heart-wrenching. You know what, I was standing in line at a registry's office when I saw the news article come out on to Kamloops, and I was thinking about it, and the first thing that came to my mind was, what does 215 children look like today? What does that look like? And I thought about the schools that we have here in our community and all of the children that we have here, and I thought about my children. And, you know, it's just so heart-wrenching. It's something that I don't think you're going to just rationalize away. You know, there's a lot of work to do. And part of it is feeling the pain, feeling the hurt, and moving through it, honestly.
And Laurie, you know what? I mean, you've just said something that I think is so simple and also profound at the same time, is that there needs to be, because, I almost stopped myself from asking you a follow-up question, which is, what does Alberta's future need to look like in the context of reconciliation? But that, because as human beings, we can be so inclined to, or let me say so guilty of, trying to just fix things, trying to solve things, trying to make them less painful, quite frankly, to try to make them go away. That's what we try to do. We try to stop thinking about them. And so we want to say, so what do we do about this? And elders and survivors are saying en masse, you need to sit with it and think about it and listen. And we can't talk about how long we need to do that for. We can't even have that conversation yet, Laurie, right?
Well, I think it's one of those things of where the healing process is going to determine the time. I think for too often people want a convenient packaged little time frame of, this is how long it's going to take you to heal. And for us, because it's it's a part of our history, this is not something that we can timestamp a convenient process to. We have to make sure that the space is created. We have to ensure that the resources are there to support the healing. So, for those people who want a convenient little logical time frame of how to move through it, it's not going to work that way. Empathy doesn't work that way. Kindness doesn't work that way. Healing doesn't work that way. They say healing is it's like being torn apart because you're being put back together in a better way, in the way that the Creator anticipated. So there is no convenient.
So well said. I love that you said that. Empathy doesn't work that way. That's so well said. Brenda, how are you processing? I mean, in the context of our conversation, first of all, just as a human being, as a Canadian, as an Albertan, this discovery, it adds to the bigger story and the bigger conversation that Canadians will be having today. Us four will be having a conversation, and on Saturday, of course, at this summit, about the future of Alberta and what it looks like. How are you processing this?
Thanks, Ryan. I mean, I show up to process this also as a mother, and living even just south of Laurie, actually, south of Noskey. And I think it's about, Laurie, you used the words about it's part of our history. And I think that we're now needing to integrate that. It's part of us as settlers. It's our history. And I think for too long, we've perhaps denied that, ignored it, or made it a very history from a very past tense. I graduated in 1996. That was, if I understand, when there were still residential schools closing at that point in time. This is part not of my parents' history or my grandparents' history. This is my history, and even then now, as we go through this real truth, we it feels like maybe the last couple of years we've even passed the truth part of a truth and reconciliation process, or that having just come back to Canada when that process was taking off and happening, perhaps it still felt quite distant, I think, for a lot of us who are individuals. And I feel like this is asking us to make the truth and reconciliation process personal for each of us.
You're so right about
our truth. Yeah.
You're so right. I don't mean to interrupt you when you talk about it's our history, right? I mean, I think of, and I know that many people, like millions of people probably, are thinking, like you said, I mean, in the 1990s, I was in high school in the 1990s. I wasn't aware of that this was going on. And even if I was aware that it was going on, none of us would have been aware of what was going on, right? I mean, this wasn't like boardings. This wasn't like, parents sending their kids to Notre Dame in Saskatchewan to become better hockey players. This wasn't like a boarding school that was all on the level and properly supervised with, I mean, I don't know why I feel like I'm holding my tongue here. I'm holding my tongue in how I'm characterizing these residential schools out of respect for survivors, not to protect perpetrators, not to protect criminals. Trust me. I'm having a very difficult. Please do.
Well, I think it's, Ryan, over the last couple of weeks, I've heard you use the word genocide a few times, and I've, hopefully that's not causing pain for those, but I think it's also, we need to really face reality and use true language. I actually went to boarding school in Saskatchewan for high school. And, 10 years ago when I came home and I was living with my parents, as, all good people our age do when we need a transition, and was aghast because my parents turned to me and did say, like, was it like that for you? And I guess I still really understood that distinction. And it felt dismissive, and it caused quite a bit of tension in our house that they could even try to equate the experience I had. But I think what it did is it opened up a conversation even with them to see there's a lot of fear that we all have to also look at when we look at our own art in this. And I think I can hear now their fear of hearing these stories and wondering, was it the same? And I needed to do the work to then be able to explain to them it wasn't. And yeah, I'm at a loss for words too, but I guess, yeah, I've just lived that experience of sitting, it's like you said, there's no time frame. We all have to sit within the, have to use some real true words and not call that a boarding school the same way I went to.
100%. And like, let's start to call out, all kinds of justification. Although let me note that the voices that seek to justify are getting quieter and quieter and quiet. Oh, it was mostly good people. It wasn't all the priests. It wasn't all the nuns. It wasn't all Catholics. It wasn't all this. It wasn't all that. It wasn't all schools. And I think collectively, people have lost the appetite for any sort of exercise that would seek to justify any element of this. Chad, from the moment, I'm trying off the top of my head to remember when you and your team of visionaries co-founded, when you founded the Next 30. What was that? What was that, like 18, something like 12 or 18 months ago-ish, approximately?
About a year ago.
About a year ago. Yeah. So, can I ask you, when we talk about, and trust me, this conversation, and on Saturday, we're going to be talking about a whole bunch of things about the future of Alberta. But in the context of this, and in the context of reconciliation, and Indigenous relations and treaties and humanity, like Laurie said, empathy, kindness. How much has the conversation evolved or changed when you talk about the future of Alberta over the next 30 years in the 1 year that's passed since you founded or co-founded the Next 30?
Well, a lot, and a lot in the last few weeks, even and months. I will say that we have had a commitment to truth and reconciliation being a prominent part of this exercise right from the start, and so I think anyone who attended any of the sessions from the public sessions that we held from January to the end of March would have sensed that, and still, if there's one thing that I learned from Laurie and other Indigenous leaders through those conversations and over the last year, it's that there is too often a rush to the reconciliation part of truth and reconciliation, and not enough time in the truth, and not enough attention for the truth. And so I think, if anything, the developments, the news of the last month or two has really kind of reinforced what all of you have been talking about up until this point, about how important it is, how challenging it's going to be to sit with the truth and really absorb it and understand it and deal with it. And but we have to, when we're talking about future generations, we're talking about the future of Alberta, we have to do so with a really clear-headed understanding of the past. And I'm really, really pleased that former Grand Chief and Commissioner of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, Wilton Littlechild is going to be at the summit on Saturday, and you're going to be speaking with him, Ryan.
Yeah.
He, I think he'll have an amazing perspective both on that history, on his experience as a commissioner, but also to kind of shed the light on how we learn from that, in order to what considerations do we need to take from that as we look to the future.
Yeah, it's I'm very much looking forward to that conversation with former Grand Chief Littlechild and so much more. People can learn more about this by visiting thenext30.ca. Again, we're talking about Saturday. This is from 9 to noon Mountain Time. Going to be some great conversations about a number of things. And Laurie, what I'm particularly interested in asking you about here right now is you're in a unique position. Obviously, first of all, as a political leader, an elected political representative, also though as an entrepreneur and as a business person, and I've had the opportunity to speak with several Indigenous leaders over the past. Well, I mean, as a matter of fact, the bigger conversations of the past number of years, but most especially in the past number of weeks, when we talk about what reconciliation looks like, there are many different approaches and angles that people expect government to take, that people expect populations to commit to, and economic partnerships keeps coming up, and it's something that people keep talking about. I would imagine that as an entrepreneur and a political leader, that's something that's really on your radar with regards to what the next 30 years or so looks like in Alberta.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Ryan. I think what it is regardless of which sector or industry you're in, the TRC calls to action, the 94 calls to action, I think honestly are just not applicable just to organizations. They apply in the most simplest form to the individual level. And I think that they apply by posing self-reflective questions about what am I doing as an individual to accomplish the calls to action? How am I contributing to this, either through my bias or not addressing my bias or not addressing my fear about being uncomfortable and having these conversations? And I think when you can take that approach as an individual, and you sit with that uncomfortableness and you challenge it and you challenge your growth and your boundaries, I think you take that into every other area. It's not just in policy, it's not just in healthcare, but it's in economic partnerships. Especially in the last number of years, there has been quite the focus on Indigenous procurement. The Indigenous procurement policies themselves can be marginal at best. Some of the initiatives that have been placed in front, that have been, I guess, focused in Alberta, can be, I think, challenging from the Indigenous perspective in a sense of they're requiring us to maybe step outside of being Indigenous or our worldview, our responsibilities. So a good example would be something like AIOC. They're only backstopping natural resource projects. What about other innovation? So when we talk about reconciliation, back to Grand Chief Noskey's point, of treaty number 6, 1876. I'm a descendant of the signatories of those treaties. It was peace and friendship. It was about peace and friendship. It was about sharing. It was about compassion. It was about kindness. And I think when we talk about reconciliation and economic partnerships, there has to be political will to have the uncomfortable conversations, but to also give due space and due recognition to not only treaty rights, but inherent rights, Indigenous rights and title, and what that truly looks like in the sense of how do we get to this place of reconciliation. So, I think it's that political will, it's that commitment, not only as an individual, but as a leader, as a business, either CEO or president or an entrepreneur. It's that commitment, it's that willingness to see through the tough patches, because leadership isn't about what you do when things are easy. It's about what you do when things are tough. And in order to really get to that true place of action, We do have to have the dialogue, but that action has to happen in parallel with that dialogue. You know, I think there's been this thought that, oh, we can talk, and then somehow, some way, it'll solve itself. So I think in the commitment, we have to be willing to be vulnerable. We have to be willing to be open. We have to be willing to, you know, I think, be honest and sit with those feelings. And I don't think that reconciliation or the TRC calls to action or the recognition and the implementation of the UN Declaration is separate from reconciliation. I think it's at the heart of it.
Well said. You're referencing the Alberta Indigenous Opportunities Corporation, AIOC. We had a really interesting roundtable just a couple of weeks ago. Was it like last Friday or maybe 2 Fridays ago with Chief Billy Morin out of Enoch Cree Nation, Edmonton's Mayor Don Iveson, and Federal Natural Resource Minister Seamus O'Regan. And my favorite, I text Chief after the interview, my favorite part of the whole thing was we're here announcing this like $1.3 billion project, big hydrogen project. It's a big deal. And we started talking about equity opportunities, and Chief Morin just took the opportunity to basically put the other two on notice. And it was great because we're just watching them in split screen get put on notice that he's saying, and it was too bad we didn't have a provincial representative there as well. So everybody could have been called to the carpet at the same time. But he took the opportunity. That was back on June 11th. If people want to see the interview, it was fabulous. But he just basically was like, listen, I mean, like we're here. This is great. There's some job opportunities, but like we could do so much more. We've not been offered the opportunities. We want the opportunities. It was a really, really great interaction. Laurie, I'm not sure if you saw it or not, but that was my favorite part of the entire interview. I texted him and told him as much. It was good.
That's awesome. No, I didn't actually have to go watch.
Well, you'll have to check
Chief
it out.
Morin is,
He's, you know what, I talked to, I promise I'll stay focused here, but I was talking to Chief. When would this have been? This was like, this was quite some time ago, but we were talking about, for example, railroads, and we were talking about like Micmac fishermen and the whole, you know, and Chief Morin just says to me, he says, I'll tell you what we need to do. He says, we need to buy the railway. And there's not 1% of him that's joking about that. He wants to buy the railway. Brenda, when we talk about the economic future of Alberta, obviously these conversations, if I know anything about the next 30, if I've learned anything by seeing how literally thousands of people have been participating, this report's been issued, there's these great opportunities in front of people, these sort of like focus points, almost like these sort of 26 big ideas that people will consider, and it's almost like a cumulative perspective, right? We're talking about Alberta's economic or fiscal future, sure, but we understand that includes conversations about sustainability, about, you know, ecological or environmental responsibility, all of the things that factor into what the general public expects to see considered. You yourself are I mean, you know, fascinating work with Earthworks Farm. How does the work that you do, how does your business involvement factor into your perspective on what the future of Alberta needs to look like?
I mean, there's a lot in that question, right? I'm going to speak to the fact of why did I even choose to come back to, say, rural Alberta?
Sure.
Because even in the last week, I've had some people say, well, that's all nice and dandy, but just look at global trends. Everybody's moving out of rural. Like, really, what can we do? And I come to this quote that actually sits on my desk. It's been there since I did my thesis 12 years ago. And it's that community is a scale where we can act, see our results, and shift the system. And so I take that back to reconciliation. We can all do our own individual reflection, but I also believe we need to start to step into conversation with each other right in our communities how do we do this collectively? I take that into, that's the economic piece too, right? So let's buy the railroad. One of the biggest, to me, inspirational stories over the last 10 years, right out in rural Alberta around not necessarily diversification, but taking responsibility, taking initiative for our own future, was a group of farmers who bought a railroad that was shutting down, bought one of the small lines, and decided to ship their own wheat collectively and become a cooperative that way, because I think for a long time, when I first moved back to rural Alberta, the conversation was about who's going to come in and save us. What one industry can we attract to our small town that's going to create jobs? And it was about the cheaper tax base, or can we give away land? And it was a race to the bottom and a fight between rural communities. And I think really, if we look at what we need to do or the future that I really believe is inspiring, is going to want to keep people here as well as attract more, is when we first even look at who are we and what do we want to be, and take ownership for that and create that. And that's where, when you talked about this being more than just a single set of economic policy, we've talked about then a future that is inclusive. What does that look like from an education and health point of view? We have to look at all of that, because then that shapes the idea of possibility. That shapes the idea of an identity that's attractive. The kinds of questions we ask is actually going to shape the answers that we have, right? And that's why for me it was so inspiring to get involved with seeing, especially 2 years ago, perhaps, the kinds of questions that were being posed to us by some of our leaders were negative, were reactive, is creating an identity in reaction to complaining about how others see it, but not actually trying to think about how do we see ourselves. And so that, to me, why, that collective set is, so it's not about a single tax policy, but it's this collective grouping and really asking and sitting with ourselves about who do we want to be in the future as Alberta, and presenting that forward for ourselves as well as our children.
Every once in a while in an interview, I'll write something down that a guest will say, so I can stare at it for the whole day after we go off air. And I've just written down, who are we? Because who are we? Like, that's a major existential question. Who are we? Chad, I mean, just this morning, as a matter of fact, I think it was maybe less than an hour ago, just this morning in the next30.ca, your team has released this great report. And if you check it out online here, I'm just sharing my screen, the next30.ca, you just scroll down on the website and there you have it. You can download the It's Possible Alberta report. You can read the report. And there's sort of a set of possibilities, 26 big ideas. And among them, of interest, these are ones that jumped out at us: a $20 per day childcare program, the TRC, Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the TRC Challenge, a bold, public, absolute emissions target, renewal of some Lougheed government policy, a new provincial license plate, the Alberta Advantage tax credit, a citizens' assembly on fiscal reform. I mean, different ideas, big ideas. People can sink their teeth into it. Have you been able, Chad, to answer that question through this entire process of the last year? Who are we? I mean, and how much would our answer have changed over the past, since 1905, let's say, Alberta's official introduction? I'd be curious to know, how do you answer the question, who are Albertans? It's a big one.
It is a big one, Ryan. And I think, part of the answer is in actually asking the question and having the conversation about it, because, like Brenda said, the questions you ask frame the kind of exploration and conversation and ultimately the kind of answer you get. So that's actually why I really like the framing around possibility. I've always thought of Alberta as a place of possibility. It can be expressed in different ways, but I think there's an element of being able to make something happen here that has always been a part, as far as I can tell, of our character, of our identity. And part of the exploration we've been on over the last few months with this project is to kind of unpack that. What does it mean? But also to maybe recommit to and rekindle that spirit of possibility. And that's really the intention with putting this report out there, is to frame up a set of possibilities, a number of ideas that have come from the participants to about how we could actualize those possibilities. And you mentioned the new license plate as one of the 26 ideas, and I think to some people that might seem like a little bit of a frivolous one compared to the others, but I actually think it might be, among all those ideas, it might be the one that most directly speaks to your question, because in some ways the opportunity to express our identity, for example, through what slogan appears on our on our license plate, is a chance to convey who we are to the rest of the world, but also to maybe change the story or recommit to a certain story about who we are to ourselves. So we suggested in the report, for example, that this came out of one of the sessions, that we could the license plate could actually say a place of possibility, Alberta. So it doesn't have to be that, but just that kind of exploration is a way to kind of frame up and channel a sense of who we are and who we want to be over the next 30 years. I think that's a neat opportunity.
License plates are great billboards. I mean, I am listening to you, Chad. I am listening, but as you're speaking, I was making my way from west to east, and I was trying to remember the slogan on every single license plate, and I'm going, okay, we've got beautiful British Columbia. I have to be honest, I don't know what Yukon and Northwest Territories plates say. We're wild rose country, ish. We've got the land of living skies. We've got friendly Manitoba, and then I get lost. I think it's Je me souviens, right, on Quebec's plate. I don't remember Ontario's, which is nice.
Yours to discover.
Yours to discover. I was going to say nice little shot at Ontario that I can't remember what their plate says, but then I just I go blank. On a snide but serious note, I'd be afraid to have this current government decide what goes on our next license plate. It would be something like no EVs or oil and gas forever. It would be something like that. So I'd have to have confidence that the right thing was going to go on the plate. But it actually prompts an important question: is what? And Chad, I'm not asking this in an insulting way. I just want to clarify it for people. Like, what's the point of this whole thing? The next 30. People have been trying to get you. People are going, is this a new political party? Is this a lobby group? Like, what is the point of all this?
Yeah, great question. Well, it's definitely not a political party. I mean, the point of this is really the set of ideas that have come out of this so far, and the engagement that has happened both in producing them and now going forward in conversing around these ideas. And if anything, I think what we would hope is that whether it's political parties themselves or other actors in society that might engage with this, communities, businesses, organizations, might both scan these ideas and maybe choose some that they feel they can act on, or maybe they are acting on, and they're going to lean into, put them in their plans, put them in their platforms, that kind of thing. But beyond that, it's also, the point is the dialogue. So we're trying to elevate a sense of hope and a sense of possibility by shining the light on many of the great things that are happening in the province, or that could happen in the province. And that's it's a tough time to do that, understandably, but it's also a necessary time, because there's studies, polls that show that Albertans are feeling not very optimistic about the future in general, and that's going to, that can be a self-reinforcing dynamic, right? And so we want to kind of change the direction of that cycle, and just give people a platform to engage with one another around a set of hopeful ideas, a set of possibilities.
Yeah,
that's the point of it.
I mean, is that whole idea of like positive self-talk, except for you want to impose it on a province, right? I mean, I remember I got an angry letter.
Invite a province to it.
Invite a province to it. I got a letter. I should have kept it, actually. It was amazing, but an email from a guy quite some time ago, a couple of years ago, furious that I was using the word recession on the radio, because he talked about how I could manifest a recession by using the word. And I thought, well, gosh, I mean, I appreciate the vote of confidence in the power of the show to manifest a recession. But at the same time, it was that sort of idea of, and I do think that there's a point to be made around, whether or not you talk about how Alberta's in real trouble or Alberta is a place of possibility. Those are completely different conversations that you can have around the same picnic table, right? And
both can be true at the same time, by the way.
Absolutely. And I think that's, and one of the things I like about the next 30 is that nobody's pretending like issues don't exist, right? And what I also like is it's not just pie in the sky type stuff. Like you've got 2,500 people or more, which is great turnout over these 9 sessions. Unfortunately, you had to have, most of it over Zoom, but but collaborating as well, taking these ideas and putting them in front of Dr. Trevor Toom, the University of Calgary economist, to make sure that people are also having realistic conversations around budgets and budgeting and to understand how all this has to work. Laurie, did your opinion change, or did you kind of your gut feeling about Alberta change, or about the future? Let me ask the question this way: how has your participation with the Next 30 impacted your perspective of Alberta over the next few decades?
I think the thing that came through very clearly was we have a lot of work to do, but there is a large willingness to get the work done. There's a lot of, I think, enthusiasm to finally broach these issues from everyday people. And they're like, it's kind of almost like that build it and they will come kind of a mentality. So I think it was really exciting. And to be able to have these discussions, the dialogue, like each of the items, like in the report, that there's the 26 areas, but each of those areas, there's an intersectionality element to them. That in order for real true success, I think in Alberta and that growth that we require within the province, we have to look at the intersectionality and the fact that there is a little bit of there's going to be an element that if one area is going to succeed, it's because all areas are going to succeed. So we can't leave one or push it out because maybe it's not somebody's individual priority, but we need to make sure that they each get that due recognition, respect, and the implementation, and to be able to work on it collectively, I think.
I'm so looking forward to conversation with the three of you and so many more this weekend. It's Saturday, June 26th, 9 a.m. to noon Mountain Time. If people want to register, it's very easy to find. You just go to thenext30.ca and then click on events right at the top of the page. You'll find the Possibility Summit. A brief description of what it's all about, and then the link to register today. We encourage you to be there. I'm proud to be participating in it myself. We're going to have some great conversations. We're going to push our understanding, I think, and challenge ourselves and broaden our horizons and all of the great things. It sounds like I'm using all these sort of weird out there, we're going to broaden our horizons and push our understandings, but I'm so excited, and I had a chance just to see it right before we started talking today, right before we went on air, these 26 big ideas. It's turning into things, and it's becoming focused conversation, and that's what I get really excited about, and I know that everybody else is as well. Before we go, I want to give each of you a chance to give us one last thing to think about today, to walk with, because these are the types of conversations that can really prompt people. I guarantee audience members right now are going, hey, what about this? Hey, what about that idea? I wonder if anybody's considered this. Brenda, I'm putting you on the spot. What's one thing you want people to walk with today? What's a challenge? What's our assignment? What's our homework, so to speak?
One of the things that got me really excited and I think motivated to come back to Alberta was our usefulness as a province. I was moving back from Europe, where there's a lot of history there, and actually how much that history around their identity was holding them back. And I was really excited to almost look at us as a province in our young adulthood and just starting to really shape our identity. And so let's wrestle with that. Let's be in our young adulthood and our early relationships, sit with the uncomfortable conversations, be willing to be surprised, show up with curiosity, and all of us be willing to change ourselves as we shape a collective identity. And that's to me what, I guess, that sense of possibility and what's kept me here for 10 years so far, and still keeps me involved in this kind of a project, even when it can feel that isn't the mainstream conversation.
I love it. Chad, what's your assignment for Real Talkers? Well,
I think I just want to reinforce the notion and the importance of listening. That was a really big feature of the sessions over the last few months. Possibility panelists themselves, the main thing they were asked to do was to listen. and at the summit as well, it'll be a great chance to listen. Obviously, to share your own ideas as well, but to listen. And I'll just leave the audience, I guess, with additional note that there's also going to be an online engagement tool where people can interact with the ideas, see what others are saying about them, and also put forward their own ideas, their additional ideas, more than the 26 that are there already.
So hang on, the live interaction will be happening like in real time. So if somebody has an idea, they can see a bunch of thumbs down coming up. Everybody hates their idea, they're going to know right away.
Well, the summit will have some of that kind of interaction, but the website has that live now as of this morning, so you can go and do that already on the website.
Yeah, I love that. When we launched Real Talk on YouTube, I was like, oh boy, we have the thumbs down button. I'm not sure how this is going to go. I sure hope there's more thumbs up than thumbs down every morning. All right, Laurie, we'll give you last word. What's our assignment today?
I think when you go to read the reports, so I'm going to challenge the listeners, go read the report. Turn to page 25, and it talks about building an inclusive social fabric. And it says that building an inclusive social fabric extends to the stories we tell ourselves. So get to know the history, know the history of not only your community, of the settler communities, but of the stewards of the land here, the Indigenous peoples in Treaties 6, 7, and 8. Get to go visit your neighbors. If you've never been to an Indigenous community before, go visit, go hang out. And I think, my other challenge, so it's almost like a 3-part challenge, 4 parts. Have open, welcoming discussions, create that safe space, be a safe space yourself. Build that mutual trust that we're going to require as a community to move forward. Develop and exercise the muscle of mutual acceptance, of accepting diversity, of welcoming diversity. Have the willingness to hear, seek, and understand, as opposed to listening to retort. Seek to understand, seek to feel. And the last thing is read the Truth and Reconciliation Calls to Action. This is a book from the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation. You can get them online. You can also download them for free. So, and the last thing I want to leave you with on the TRC Calls to Action, these were created by the survivors. This directly came from the survivors of Indian residential school systems. So read them with honor, read them with diligence, and bring them dignity. Thank you.
Read them with honor, read them with diligence, and bring them dignity. Beautifully said. Laurie Buffalo, Brenda Barritt, Chad Park. I'm grateful. I know that a couple of you shuffled around your schedules today to make this possible. I'm grateful for that. Thank you for this conversation. I'm very much looking forward to Saturday. Again, 9 to noon. It's the Possibility Summit. You can find more and register to participate at thenext30.ca. To the three of you, thank you so much for your time this morning. I've appreciated the conversation.
Hi.
Thanks,
okay,
Ryan.
so we hope to see you there on Saturday. I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to be participating again. Grand Chief, former Grand Chief, Little Child. I'm looking forward to that conversation in particular. But again, there's going to be a lot of great ideas in front of people, a lot of optimism, I think, as part of this exercise. And I know that some people are going, yeah, but what? So this isn't are they starting a political party? Are they lobbying? Are they trying to? This is grassroots public conversation, big ideas, focused talking points. These are the types of things. I mean, if you need to find a political angle on it right now, these are the types of things that you can talk to candidates about at your front door, that you can talk about in electoral forums, that you can press those seeking office on. Hey, what are you doing about this? What's your position on this? What do you think would work here? How will you address this challenge, right? What's your vision? Do we properly or frequently enough ask politicians or those seeking office what their vision is, as opposed to just what a lousy job that they think somebody else is doing? What's their vision? How will you inspire us? How will you earn and retain my vote? Let's not take it for granted. I know in Alberta, everybody thinks that they know how it goes, because if you look at the track record, some political parties haven't had to try that hard, have they? In fact, from time to time broken your trust, yet for some reason kept the vote. And I think it's time that Albertans demand more. Well, it's long past time that Albertans demand more from elected representatives. I think it's being a great conversation on Saturday. I look forward to seeing you there. Our friends at Dairy Queen want to remind you that at their 6 locations in Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park, we're talking about Baseline Road, Y Gardens, Westmount, Newcastle, Nemeo, and Palisades. I decided to read the list in reverse order just to prove it could be done.
Ooh.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to show off, but that was more the Dairy Queens of Sherwood Park in Northwest Edmonton. Right now, if you're feeling like today's a perfect day for that classic, like, you know, a Dairy Queen burger, right? You know it. The minute you bite into it, you go, that's from DQ. That is the DQ grill. If you're feeling like today's a perfect day for a burger at those 6 locations, 2 single cheeseburgers are just $5. 2 double cheeseburgers are $7. Which I guess if you stack the 2 doubles would mean that you could you could even go to the point of maybe a quad cheeseburger. We can announce this as a quad cheeseburger for just $7. A quadruple cheeseburger. It's all in how you approach it. Stack the 2 of them, maybe lose the top bun on the bottom burger. Right? And then you have this sort of like, you'd be able to go bun, patty, bun, patty, bun, patty. Right? Plus, don't forget the cheese, the pickles, the ketchup, the mustard served on a warm, toasted bun at the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. Warm toasted bun doesn't quite have the same power as rich hot fudge.
Can we just try one more time?
So you've got your grilled all-beef patties topped with processed cheddar cheese, pickles, ketchup, and mustard served on a warm toasted bun!
I was going to say warm hot bun, but then I was like, that was wrong.
I mean, they're warm, but warm and hot.
It's a bit redundant.
The toaster's like, what am I?
Yeah.
What am I, processed cheese? And then the cheese is like, excuse me.
Pardon me.
This is what happens when you... No, I'm not going to say it. This is what happens when you eat mushrooms and go into a Dairy Queen. What? The team at Eden Landscaping, if you got you got drainage problems, so you got mushrooms popping up in your yard, first things first, don't eat them. Second of all, get in touch with Mike at Eden Landscaping. That's literally what we've tasked Mike with when it comes to our yard. When we get one of those big August rains, half of our yard is underwater for like a week. I'm not even joking you. Mike goes, yeah, we can fix that. I go, yeah, that's what the last guy said. He goes, yeah. Mike goes, yeah, but we solve problems. That's what we do. And I said, are you serious? So I get this gleam in my eye. And I say, you want me to tell Real Talkers that you solve problems that other landscapers can't solve? He goes, buddy, I've been doing it for 20 years. He goes, you can tell people whatever you want about our problem solving because the proof is in the pudding. And I said, all right. He said, you just make sure you tell people to go check out landscapeedmonton.ca because that's where you can see the type of stuff that they do. You're going, well, he can't solve our problem. I guarantee it. Nobody's been able to. Check him out today. Eden Landscaping, a proud partner of Real Talk at landscapeedmonton.ca. We know that there's a lot to talk about. We know there's a lot to wrestle with. We know there's a lot to reflect on. The truth is our hearts are shattered. The truth is we're angry. The truth is we know that it is time to act in meaningful fashion. Real Talkers, I don't have to tell you to reflect on this today. I know you will. I know you are. We'll pick it up again tomorrow morning. We'll talk to you then.